one of these people came out and said, Dr. Epstein, I don't mean to scare you. He said, but based on what you've told us and the work you're doing, he said, I suspect that you're going to be killed in some sort of accident in the next few months.
This Harvard scientist got death threats, not for politics, not for fame, but for exposing something most people aren't ready to hear.
And it gets bigger and bigger, but as it gets bigger, it also gets more scary because we start to run into pushback, I suppose you could say. I mean, I've had other warnings too. He said, and I just want to tell you two things. He said, number one, you have their attention. And number two, if I were you, I would take precautions.
Oof. That's scary.
We've had now 6 incidents in total. Well, I was trained as a research psychologist at Harvard. I was actually B.F. Skinner's last doctoral student. And some people don't know just how broad psychology is. It's really broad. And one of the areas that research psychologists study is called influence. So you've probably heard of a best-selling book called The Nudge, about how you can just do subtle kinds of things and that will alter people's behavior.
Right.
So you've heard of probably the Stanford prison experiment, or the obedience experiments that were done at Yale. All that is studying influence, how you can influence people. So back in 2012, my website got hacked, which is not a big deal, but I was notified by Google in I think 8 or 9 different emails. So that made me curious because I'm wondering, who made them the sheriff of the internet? Why am I getting notified by Google and not by some government agency, some nonprofit organization? But then I got more curious because I've been a coder since I was a teenager, and I saw that they were blocking access to my websites, not just on google.com, which makes sense. That's their product, as it were, or their platform, I should say. We're the product. But the point is, it's not just on Google, but they were somehow blocking me on Safari, which is part of Apple. How did they do that? They were blocking me on Firefox, which is run by a nonprofit organization. How could they do that? So over time, I started in 2012, just started really digging in and trying to find out how Google really worked and just how much of an impact they were having and whether everything was above board or were some things hidden. In early 2013, I started doing what I'm good at, which I've been doing for almost 50 years on many topics in psychology. I started doing what are called randomized controlled experiments. Because at that point, I began to suspect that Google's search results could be used to manipulate people. So what if when they're pulling from among billions of links out there, they're pulling links that make one candidate look better than the other, or one product, one dog food, one guitar brand, and they're suppressing links which make the other candidate look good? Could that actually impact people's thinking, people's votes even? And I made a prediction, which is scientists always do. I made a prediction. I thought, I bet you I could shift the voting preferences of undecided voters. So that's key here. I'm always starting with undecided people. And I could shift it by 2 or 3%, I thought, just by favoring one candidate or the other in search results. In other words, my team and I had to build a simulator that works just like google.com. It was called Cadoodle.
Cadoodle, yeah. Yes. I saw it in your book.
So, but it worked exactly like Google. And I thought, okay, one group, they get search results that favor one candidate. The other group gets search results that favor the other candidate. And then there's a control group, so that neither candidate is favored. And I thought basically I could shift voting preferences by 2 or 3%. That was my prediction. I have never been so wrong because that first shift we got in that first experiment was 48%, which I thought was a mistake. I thought that was impossible. That's after one search. So they're undecided voters. The only difference, they're all seeing exactly the same material. They can click on any of those links, go to the web page, so they have access to exactly the same material. The only difference was the order in which we were presenting the material. And we got a shift of 48%. And don't forget, we're using random assignment. So that means we can push people in either direction, any way we want. So anyway, I thought it was a mistake. We repeated it. We got a shift of, I think, 63%. And then we began to learn that we could hide what we were doing. Even if it was blatantly obvious that the search results were biased, most people didn't see the bias. And we thought, what happens if we just fool people a little bit? So it's candidate A, candidate A, candidate A, candidate B, candidate A, candidate A. Get it? So what if we just mix it up a little bit just to get people confused?
Right. That's
called masking. We found that we could get these enormous shifts in voting preferences with no one having the slightest idea that they're looking at biased search results, no one knowing that they're being manipulated. So we got to that point, this is early 2013, and we said, this is important. And we wrote it up for the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which is one of the top scientific journals in the world. It's very, very hard to publish there. By this time, we had done more experiments. We had done a nationwide experiment with people from all 50 states. We had done a big experiment in India, right in the middle of a big election of theirs. It had more than 2,000 people in it. And this got published in, it's called, what we call lovingly PNAS, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And the last time I checked, that very technical scientific article had been accessed or downloaded from their website more than 250,000 times, which is extremely rare for a scientific piece. Extremely rare. I mean, literally, you can publish a piece on discovering gravity waves, and I know the guy who did that, and you'll end up with a few thousand. But this got enormous attention. It got written up in Washington Post and other places because it's scary, because it means that Google has the power to shift possibly millions of votes in elections, election after election, not just here, but around the world, with no one knowing that they're doing it.
Do you think this was their plan from the start? Or do you think this was some sort of a natural evolution of their product?
I think that they've done a lot of things over the years which start out very innocently. Search suggestions, I think, started very innocently. They're not innocent anymore, and we know because we've studied that now and quantified that. I think a lot of things, they just start out innocently, and then someone or other realizes that they can use this to change people's thinking and behavior. And they have very, very strong ideals, very strong values at Google, and they're very proud of that. I actually happen to share a lot of their values. So part of me is always, cheering for Google as I'm studying them and discovering what terrible things they're doing. So they have what they have done, and this is a whole separate story, which we can talk about later if you want to. But what they have done more and more is use very powerful techniques of mind control to control people's thinking and behavior, and literally around the world on a massive scale. And they know exactly what they're doing. For years, I was just doing experiments and discovering these techniques, and very skeptical, always very skeptical, and yet then replicating it, or other labs have replicated these same findings. But the point is that over time I realized this is a really, really serious problem. And over time, my findings were also revealed by whistleblowers, leaked documents, leaked emails. 2018, for example, there was a leak of emails from Google to the Wall Street Journal, in which Googlers, that's what they call themselves, Googlers were discussing how can we use ephemeral experiences. Turns out that's a very important phrase, ephemeral experiences or ephemeral content, to change people's views about Trump's travel ban. And when I saw that, my head spun because I realized I had been studying the power of ephemeral experiences to impact people for years at that point. By that point, I've been studying it for 5 years.
In what context were you studying it?
In the context of just finding these techniques. That first one, using search results, that's now called SEME, the Search Engine Manipulation Effect, SEME. And I had been studying these techniques one after another. Search suggestions, for example, you just by fiddling with the search suggestions, you flash at people. We showed in experiments that you can turn a 50-50 split among undecided voters into a 90-10 split with no one having the slightest idea they've been manipulated. But here I'm seeing in language being used in the company, their employees saying, how can we use ephemeral experiences to change people's views?
On the travel ban.
In this case, on the travel ban, but our experiments were showing more and more and more that you can use these techniques to change people's opinions about anything at all, not just candidates in an election, but anything at all. So the thing just grew. It grew and grew because we were finding more and more that these techniques exist. We had to give them names because they're new. They've never existed before in human history. It could take a year or two or even 5 years to really understand one of these. And then we quantify them. So when we quantify them, that means we can calculate for a given election or a given product, we can calculate how big a shift Google can produce. And it gets bigger and bigger, but as it gets bigger, it also gets more scary because we start to run into pushback, I suppose you could say.
What kind of pushback?
Well, not much until I testified before Congress for the first time about these issues. That was in 2019.
Right.
Which was probably the most disastrous year in my life, all starting with that testimony, with my congressional testimony. As one of my board members said to me at one point, well, they left you alone before that, but once you testified before Congress, they're not going to leave you alone anymore. Anyway, that same summer that I testified, I did a private briefing for a bunch of state AGs, attorneys general, about all the work we'd been doing and about the potential power that these companies have. And so there were very prominent AGs there from around the country. This was at Stanford University. And then I went out in the hallway and just was hanging around, and one of these people came out and said, Dr. Epstein, I don't mean to scare you. He said, but based on what you've told us and the work you're doing, he said, I suspect that you're going to be in some sort of accident in the next few months. And obviously I wasn't, because I'm still here, but my wife was. My beautiful wife, Misty, was a few months later in a car accident that was very suspicious. The vehicle was never examined. The vehicle, the little truck I had bought her, was never examined forensically. It disappeared from the impound lot. I was told it had been sold to a parts dealer in Mexico without my permission. It just disappeared.
This was how long after this guy said this to you?
About 3 or 4 months.
And who was the one who was the guy who said this to you?
He was and still is one of the state attorneys general. I mean, I've had other warnings too. I've had other warnings around that same time. I had a reporter from DC call, first asking a bunch of questions about the work and what was the latest and all that stuff. And then a couple of days later, he called again and he said, I just got off the phone with a woman who I believe to be head of public relations at Google. And I think you should know that what happened. And I said, what happened? She said, well, I started asking about your work and she started screaming at me. He said, that's very unprofessional. I've never seen that before. He said, and I just want to tell you two things. He said, number one, you have their attention. And number two, if I were you, I would take precautions.
Oof. That's scary.
We've had now 6 incidents in total.
What are the other incidents?
Well, the last one, which was right, by coincidence, it was right after I had had lunch with probably the most prominent state AG in the country. Mm-hmm. That's Ken Paxton from Texas, who has an office with 800 attorneys, and they've gone after Google over and over again, and they're having an impact. They're having a big impact. But right after he left, so there were still some people left, and it was in a restaurant. Oh, I have the.
What do you got?
You can use your own judgment. I'll tell you exactly what happened.
Okay.
And I even have an image.
Could you want to text it to Steve and he could pop it on the TV for us?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's a really good idea.
Yeah. We can have a full screen on the.
Oh, and Steve's already in here.
Yep.
Oh, that's a really good idea.
That's what I'm here for.
Well, this is one of the creepiest things that's happened so far.
Okay, this is what you talked about on Rogan, right?
Yes, and I didn't realize that. Now you see that.
So here we go. This looks like a sharp piece of metal needle.
Yeah, but look at the coating, and look how the blade at the end has been sharpened to an extreme degree. Mm-hmm. So General Paxton, AG Paxton, leaves with his staff. My staff is still there, and one of them comes over to sit next to me. This is right next to me because I'm on a bench seat in the restaurant, and this is my computer case for my laptop, and so she just slides in next to me, and then she screams like a real scream, like out of a movie, and we all go, what's going on? And she goes, look, and there's this thing sticking out of her thumb. It's gone a half inch into her thumb. It was sticking out of the computer case. Now, this is the 6th incident so far.
So where do you think that thing could have come from? Well, and what was it?
Someone put it there, obviously, when I did not have control over my computer case. And what is it? No one knows. I
still have it?
I have people in intelligence, yeah, but we didn't want to. There's a place in Illinois that they use for stuff like this, because that coating is obviously strange.
Yeah.
And obviously the tip is strange, and the object itself, no one's ever seen anything like it. Right. This is the kind of thing that Putin does to get rid of his enemies.
Except he has poisons that he puts on them, right?
Right.
This thing wasn't poisoned.
Well, we never analyzed it.
What happened to the lady after? Anything?
Well, what happened was that we all kind of informally decided that we'd just see whether she was going to get sick or not. It's pretty. Oh my gosh. Pretty stupid of us.
Dark.
I know, and she didn't get sick, but she completely freaked out. I bet. She really pulled back from the project, and she was actually in charge of our what's called major gifts, so the high level fundraising, and she just pulled way back. We had our managing director, who was fabulous, who'd been there for 2 years. She and her very handsome husband were walking Saturday afternoon in San Diego, which is a pretty safe city, 2 p.m. Saturday afternoon, downtown San Diego. A guy comes out of the crowd, pulls a knife, slits his face all the way from his ear down to his mouth, all the way through. And then he looks at Michelle, our managing director, and laughs and runs away.
Jesus.
She lasted another 2 or 3 months. Her family was putting tremendous pressure on her to quit. I don't blame them and I don't blame her, but I mean, it was a tremendous loss for us, tremendous loss. And there's been a fairly recent incident with one of my sons. So that gets, and he works for the project. In other words, he works on the secret side of what we do, which is our monitoring system, which we can talk about if you want. But that system, 11 o'clock at night, one night, stopped working. The data stopped flowing. I tried calling up our tech people. I couldn't reach anyone. I think it was a Thursday night. I called him because I know he's involved with the tech part of it. And he said, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll drive over to the office," which by the office, he meant the secret location that I don't even know where that is. I never found out where it was. And that's 11 o'clock at night. Midnight, I still haven't heard from him. The phone rings. He said, "Dad, don't worry, I'm okay." I said, what happened? He said, "Well, I was driving over there," he said, "and I got broadsided by," he said, a black vehicle, which immediately pulled away and drove off at very high speed. No matter what changes they seemed to make to guaranteeing people's privacy, they also violated people's privacy. So, for example, they made Google their default search engine.
Mozilla did.
Mozilla at some point actually made Google their default search engine. Or even when they didn't do that, which is pretty blatant, they used Google's quarantine list. Most people don't know anything about this, but this is all the stuff happening in the background that is so creepy.
Yeah.
Before a browser takes you somewhere, it could be anything. Safari, which is Apple's browser. Before Safari takes you to a website, it has to check to see whether the website is safe.
Sure.
They're not going to take you to, malware sites in Nigeria, right?
Right.
Well, where are they going to get a good list that they can check at super high speed? Well, the answer is because Google crawls the internet more than any other company and has the largest database of any other company. Everyone uses, including Safari, everyone uses Google's quarantine list. So that means, so Brendan saw this. I mean, he saw that basically Firefox was also checking Google's quarantine list. That means that when people are doing what they think are private searches using Firefox, Google's getting the information.
Mm-hmm. Did he try to stop this?
I don't know what you could ask him, but I've never asked him. Okay. That's straight away that very question. Right. But I do know he at some point said I've had it, and he was determined. That's why Brave is called Brave. Yeah. That's why, because he was determined to do something brave and really set up a browser and a search engine. They're both called Brave. That Google cannot track, that Google has no control over. Google has control all over the place. Where people have no idea they have control.
What happened with DuckDuckGo? How'd they get compromised by Google? Do you know? Well,
DuckDuckGo is another story. I don't like to talk too much about DuckDuckGo because I don't think it's personally, I don't even consider it a search engine. DuckDuckGo is primarily a database aggregator. So what does that mean? That means they look at big databases that other people have created, and that's how they come up with the answers to your queries, your search queries. Now, that's not a search engine. Do they have a a little. Do they have a crawler that looks around the internet? Yeah, but that's very little of their data comes from their own crawler. So another reason I don't like to get stuck on DuckDuckGo is because there are much bigger problems out there.
Okay.
For example,
Well, I was just like, okay. keep
again,
going.
let me just give you because I think this
Continue.
will make the point.
Okay.
2016, Google and Microsoft signed a pact, which no one has ever. It's never leaked. So the exact contents of the pact have never been made known. But they signed a pact, and the next thing that happened is they all dropped all of the lawsuits and complaints they had against each other worldwide. Microsoft pulled the funds from all the nonprofit organizations it was supporting that fought Google. All the funds gone. All the consultants that Microsoft had, and they, by the way, they offered me a consultant position with them at one point, and I refused. Microsoft did, and I refused. But a dear friend of mine, he accepted. They got rid of all their consultants, all at once, gone. And Windows 11 became. Windows 10 has a lot of problems, but Windows 11 became a very aggressive tracker. And some of us believe that from that point on, their search engine, Bing, which had been losing about $1 billion a year for Microsoft, started to save some money, probably by scraping contents from Google. Now, that's a much bigger problem because Bing has believe it or not, gets a lot more traffic than DuckDuckGo does. Yahoo. I have a copy of a document that was filed with the SEC, which gives Yahoo the right to scrape Google content for Yahoo search results. The problem is, I'm just saying, it's bigger than you think. It's there. My sister wears a Fitbit. Mm-hmm. When you think Fitbit, you don't think Google.
No.
But Google owns Fitbit. They bought Fitbit so they could get all that physiological data 24 hours a day. Do you have I hope not a Nest? You probably do.
I have a Nest thermostat, yeah.
You have a Nest thermostat?
And I have all the security cameras. We have a Nest security camera right there.
Okay, so about 6 years ago or so, Google bought Nest.
Right.
Now, some people know that, but what they don't know is that about a year or two later, some what do I call myself? Some idiot professor type pulled apart one of the new Nest thermostats that they were selling and found that they had put a microphone into it without telling anybody. Now, around the same time that they're installing microphones into
Wait. This was the one that you purchased?
No. This is another professor type.
Another professor type.
Another lunatic like me
Purchased a Nest.
to investigate it.
Uh-huh.
To find out the question at the time was, why would Google be so interested in Nest?
Yeah.
Well, the reason they were interested is because it gets put in people's homes, and they were submitting patent applications at the time for new methods of analyzing sounds within the home. So, for example, just picking up on sounds coming from the bathroom, you can tell whether the kids are brushing their teeth enough. Sounds from the bedroom, that tells you a lot of stuff, including whether the sex life is any good or the relationship is failing. Hundreds of things that can be monetized can be picked up from sounds within the home. And Google was getting patents issued for new methods for analyzing sounds within the home. This is right about the time that they secretly installed microphones into some Nest devices.